The man awoke in the dark, alone. He could not remember why he was there, or even his own name. He could make out a small room around him, made out of cold stone, and he could also see a door made out of wood. He stretched his hearing, for his ears were really the only thing he could rely on. It was faint, but he could hear something. A whisper, perhaps, or maybe a prayer. Or was it a plea for salvation? He did not know, but he could not stand being alone in his cell any longer. He had to leave. Slowly, and as quiet as he could, he inched himself towards the door. He grabbed the handle on the door and prayed to whatever God would hear him that it would turn. At first, it would not budge, but only because it had not been used in many years. He put more force into it, and sure enough, the handle turned, and the door creaked open. The noise the door made as it opened was loud and echoed throughout the corridor for what seemed like an eternity. The man froze in place, crouched in front of the doorway, not daring to move or even breathe. He waited and waited for something, anything, to happen, but nothing did. Nobody came, and the place he was in became silent again, as it always seemed to be, silent, except for the whispering he could almost make out, but not quite. He ignored it for now and remembered to breathe again. After a couple more breaths, he stood up and strained his eyes to try and see where he was. All he could make out was more cold stone and a long, dark corridor to his right. To his left was nothing but a dead end. He seemed to be in the last room in a corridor full of rooms. He began walking slowly and quietly into the corridor. But as he walked deeper into the hallway, he began to notice something. That whispering he heard earlier was getting louder, and for a split second, he thought about heading back to his cell and closing the door behind him. He quickly pushed that thought from his head, for whatever was in front of him could not be worse than the cold, dark room behind him. At least, that's what he told himself. He moved forward, getting ever closer to the source of the voice that haunts him. What disturbed him the most, however, was not that the voice was getting louder, but that it was no clearer now than when he first woke up in the dark, abandoned cell. He looked behind him and he found that it looked exactly the same as the road in front of him. He did not know why, but he knew that if he turned back now, he would never leave, and he would wander forever, alone, in the dark. Finally, he came upon the room in which he was sure the voice was coming from. The voice was as loud as it had ever been, and it seemed that it would never stop. He could not stand it any longer. He had to make it stop. He went towards the door and slammed his fists into it. The door flew open, but there was nobody inside. All that was in the room was a fading lamp with a piece of paper next to it. No, there was something else in there. A tall piece of furniture, covered in a dirty white sheet. The man went towards the lamp and picked up the note. He read it slowly, again and again, but could not understand what it meant. He looked towards the only other thing in the room, the tall, covered object, which he realized was a mirror. The man went near the mirror and removed the cover. He looked into the deep void that was his face. A smile appeared in the mirror, and suddenly he began to laugh, loudly, his pain-stricken laughter echoing throughout the halls of his prison. He picked up the note one last time and read it, truly understanding it. He knew he had written it to himself, for this exact purpose, so that he could never forget. In the same voice which he had heard before, he read it to himself, so that he could hear it and know why he was there. He closed the door to the room and locked it, never to be opened again. He blew the last light from his lamp and sat on the cold stone. After all, this is where he belonged. In the dark, he could not see his reflection in the mirror. He could not see the devil that looked back at him. He slept alone in the dark.